guys, Ryan from Clovis Star. It's November 5th, 2016. I wanted to talk about the NoDAPL protest. They found a guy named Kyle Thompson who worked for the DAPL pipeline project, and apparently they are calling him, at least the Young Turks are saying, he was Agent Provocateur, or a fake protester.
But from time to time, the police bring in a tremendous amount of weaponry. They've got giant mine-resistant Humvees. Who's planting mines? They've got snipers, they've got stun grenades, they've got rubber bullets, pepper spray, real bullets. The list goes on and on. Why? Because the cops say, hey, every once in a while, we think someone is shooting at us from the protesters' side. Once they went after a middle-aged woman, and they didn't find any revolver, they found a prayer stick, and we showed you pictures of that. Now, we finally have found a shooter, or at least a guy who could have been a shooter with an AR-15 rifle, it looks like, within the area of the water protectors. But he's not among them. So he is a guy, as we find out later, actually works for the Dakota Access Pipeline. His name appears to be Kyle Thompson, and we have video of him.
Now, he wasn't caught protesting. He wasn't caught starting any violence. He was driving down the street. People didn't recognize him, the protesters didn't recognize him. He was on a public roadway. They ran him off the road, and I'll show you him in this truck where he's being ran off the road. Then they all surround him, and they're beating on his truck and freaking out. And then he gets out of his truck, and he's got all these protesters coming at him. Well, he gets his gun out, and he starts pointing at him. He's like, hey, stay away. You know, he was apparently...
He gets out of the truck, and then he's got the rifle. And then you'll see him with the other water protectors there, and they realize he's not one of them, and they're asking him, who are you? They eventually bring in the police for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they wind up disarming him. But look at what happens when he gets out of his truck. Watch.
Private security for the DAPL project. This isn't about whether I support it or not, because, you know, I'm conflicted on it. First of all, this Fort Laramie Treaty should have been honored. I agree with that. The 1851 treaty should have been honored. It looks like the natives are correct about their territory. They've never fought about it until now. There's been ranchers there ranching. There's farmers and stuff raising grain. But they haven't complained until now. Well, they should have complained before. And being passive-aggressive obviously doesn't help. So there's two sides to this. Now they're protesting. Hey, good for them. But when people are attacking somebody, running them off the road, and beating on their car, you know, I mean, how many cars out at the NoDAPL protest have been burned and spray painted, and tires in the road being lit on fire? You know, how environmental is that? These people are supposed to be environmentalists and protesters for the environment, and yet they're lighting, you know, rubber on fire in the middle of the road, and there's black soot, you know, filling the air for miles. It just doesn't seem consistent, first of all. The Young Turks, and I'm going to point these out in a couple of videos, are saying this guy, oh, we don't know who he was, you know, nobody knew who he was or whatever. Nobody asked him before they ran him off the road. But when he was asked, he told them. And then I'll show you the clip here where they admit it.
Look, an overwhelming majority of the time when people talk about false flag operations, it's usually some conspiratorial nonsense. But there is a reason why that term exists. It's because in the past, there have been these things called false flag operations. And in fact, we've got a lot of recorded history of authorities that put people in a crowd to do something wrong, to cause up violence or unrest, so that the authorities can come in and crush the protesters.
And then the fallout of all this is this guy's been accused of being an agent provocateur or a false protester, but there's no evidence of it. But the problem that I have with this is not that they're coming up with conspiracy theories. I do that sometimes myself. And a conspiracy theory is only a theory until there's empirical proof otherwise, and then it becomes a conspiracy fact. There's a lot of that. And, you know, Sank here, or Jank, or whatever they call him, you know, admits to that. Certainly, that has been known throughout history to happen from our government and others, where they incite violence to cause a certain outcome.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward as to who he is. I mean, we found two documents that listed him as a Dakota Access worker. And he himself, as I've understood, to even our security, stated that he worked for Dakota Access. And so it was pretty straightforward.
And so when the when they did the broadcast about the Malheur Wildlife Refuge protesters' verdict, where they got found not guilty recently on the 26th of October, the 27th of October, they all got found not guilty, or at least 7 of them did. They're like, oh, it's white privilege, it's white privilege. You know, if this was the other side of things, they wouldn't have gotten white privilege.
Wait, you want to talk about white privilege?
Think about the number of people who were shot and killed prior to them even getting an opportunity to be found guilty or innocent.
No, to that point,
Court,
the whole country up in arms when OJ was acquitted. Now, I don't think OJ should have been acquitted, and I was shocked and surprised by it, and I was against that, right? But I don't judge based on race. I thought, well, that guy did it. I don't care what his race is. There was ample evidence that he seemed to cut those 2 people's heads off, right? And the whole country's like, how could they acquit? It's the blacks on the jury who acquitted. I knew it. You see that? Now this happens. They're like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean whites who agree with the guys acquitting? There's no problem here. Look away, right? If you were outraged by the OJ acquittal, you should be...
But let's make clear what's underlying all of this and a lot of people's problems with it. We showed you the 2 guys in the video. If those guys were named Ahmed and Mahmoud,
not guilty, man. You got these jurors.
Still not guilty?
These jurors are pure.
It would have been a different jury. It would have been a much different jury.
Hard to prove a conspiracy.
It's hard to prove a conspiracy. If anybody stops you, brothers under Islam, if anybody stops you, police, military, kill them.
No,
not guilty.
Hard to say.
And then, you know, to shame them more, they use this video of this guy, of this random guy who shows up at their refuge, who wasn't a part of the main group, and who was left over after everybody else had got arrested, after Lavoy Finicum had got shot and killed, murdered, assassinated, and after, you know, like 24 people had been rounded up and put in jail. You know, they've got 4 guys left on the refuge. One of them's this weird dude named Sean Anderson, and he's yelling into the camera all this insane stuff about threats and whatever. Well, he wasn't Ammon Bundy. You look at Ammon Bundy, and, you know, you see his demeanor, and he met with law enforcement. He made videos asking to meet with law enforcement. On the way to Grant County, when he was going to the rally there, they were going to have a meeting at the community building, and the sheriff of Grant County invited Ammon and the other protesters up to go visit with them, and they accepted. The Young Turks here and other media, they say, oh, they were going up to take over Grant County. No, they were going over there to educate people, which they had been doing for months. They had been doing that for about a year previous to this, you know, occupation of the wildlife refuge. And, you know, what they claimed was adverse possession, which is a legal grounds for taking over a building that, you know, the feds claim to own. Adverse possession is something they tried to restrain from the court hearing, the trial that they had. But if you look it up, adverse possession is a legitimate procedure. And, you know, everything they did was legitimate. And obviously they were found not guilty, so that confirms it. And having your weapon is not illegal. We have Second Amendment rights. Protesting is not illegal. We have First Amendment rights. But the way that, like, the Young Turks and other media portray it is, these were armed terrorists, blah, blah, blah. Where, in fact, they were very cordial. They met with the Paiute tribe. A representative of the Paiute tribe went out to the refuge to inspect the artifacts that have been collected and see the condition that they're in. You know, they weren't stored very well by the government, and they were disappointed. But, you know, the Bundys and, you know, the occupants of that protest, you know, were very accommodating to everybody. Hundreds of people went in and out of that refuge every day. Media, lawmakers, Greg Warden, a lawmaker in Oregon, a lawmaker from Nevada, what was her name? Shel Fiore. A bunch of them are, you know, coming in and out. Lawmakers, police, FBI. I'll show you all the pictures as I'm talking about this on the screen here, where they were meeting with people. They were being very cordial. But if you listen to, you know, the way that Young Turks talk about it, you know, they're like, oh, well, the reason why they got off was not because they were innocent. It's because this was white privilege. They didn't deserve to get off, but they got off anyway. And, you know, if this would have been a, you know, different color of person, they would have gotten killed by the police and blah, blah, blah. Well, they did. Lavoy Finicum gave his life for this protest. He gave his life to stand up for the Hammonds. The Hammonds, which were tried as a double jeopardy situation where they had already served their time, on a bunk charge of arson where they had set fire breaks for their ranch and put the fires out themselves and didn't do any damage to anybody's property. I mean, they improved the property, is what they said, what it was shown in the court hearing with the Hammonds, is they improved the government property by $100. Nobody was hurt. There was no victim. And they served a year in jail, paid $400,000 in fines, and then the government resentenced them to 4 more years in jail. And that was double jeopardy, and that was wrong. And that's what the Bundys and other ranchers went out to protest. And, you know, the way you make it, the way that the liberal media, the progressive, make it sound is, oh, these were armed terrorists and blah, blah, blah. No, they were not in it. They were not guilty. They were not terrorists. They were not threatening anybody, except for that idiot at the end after everybody got killed, but not Ammon, not any of the people who just got exonerated. You know, they weren't threatening anybody. They were being very hospitable to people. They were meeting with the law enforcement. They were meeting with the government. They were calling in lawmakers. They were calling in the media. Everybody was accommodated. Everybody was being treated well. And then LeBoy Finicum got shot on his way to meet with law.
Okay, afterwards, the reason they got caught in the first place is they left the federal land to go take over another county, which they also announced publicly. I've never seen a clearer case of a conspiracy. Conspiracy means 2 or more people working together towards an objective. This is it. Yeah. This is the. Wait, you want to talk about white privilege? They had to restrain the lawyer, but that's white privilege. Thinking like, we can break any law we like. We just proved it to you, right? So how dare you even hold us in your goddamn courts when we are above the law? Whereas if, can you imagine again, a black lawyer on a Black Panther Party or a Muslim lawyer on a Muslim case going, well, you're not releasing them right away, I'm going to come assault the judge. And then an overwhelming majority of the time when people talk about false flag operations, it's usually some conspiratorial nonsense. But there is a reason why that term exists. It's because in the past, there have been these things called false flag operations. And in fact, we've got a lot of recorded history of authorities that put people in a crowd to do something wrong, to cause up violence or unrest, so that the authorities can come in and crush the protesters. Whereas if, can you imagine again, a black lawyer on a Black Panther Party or a Muslim lawyer on a Muslim case going, well, you're not releasing them right away, I'm going to come assault the judge. And then he'd be in Guantanamo. And you know it.
To illustrate my point, thanks for tuning in. This is Clovis Star. Check us out at opinions.clovisstar.com. And also check us out at Patreon /Clovis Tribe. Thanks for tuning in.